The night was quiet. Too quiet for Georgia in the year 1823. The air carried the heavy scent of magnolia and the whisper of chains. But at the heart of a cotton plantation near Savannah, a gate creaked, and locked from the inside. By morning, Sarah was gone. No footprints, no witness, no trace. Only the soft sway of the locked gate, moving in the mist, like it had seen something it would never tell. They said she vanished into thin air. They said it was witchcraft, but those who really knew Sarah whispered that she had planned her escape for years, and this was the night she made the impossible real. Sarah was not like the others on the plantation. Quiet, observant, and strangely calm, she carried herself with a strength that unsettled the overseers. Where others broke under the whip, Sarah's eyes never wavered, dark, patient, waiting. By day, she picked cotton under the punishing sun. By night, she watched the stars. She had once told an old slave named Hiram, "When you know the stars, you can find your way home, even in the dark." No one understood what she meant. But Hiram noticed. Sarah always looked west, beyond the marshlands, beyond the whispering trees, like she was memorizing the land. The plantation gate was more than just wood and iron. It was a symbol. No slave had ever crossed it alive without a pass. But Sarah, she had been given a key once, years ago when she worked as a maid in the master's house. The key was meant to open the pantry gate. She kept a copy, not to steal food, but freedom. She hid it beneath a loose floorboard in her cabin, wrapped in old fabric. For years she never touched it, not until that night. Slaves on the plantation spoke in whispers. They had seen what happened to those who tried to run, hunted down by hounds, dragged back in chains, or worse. But Sarah had something they didn't, a plan. She had spent months trading small items, scraps of metal, salt, or cloth, with slaves from nearby plantations. Each trade brought her a piece of information, a creek path, a hidden route, the name of a man called Josiah, who lived deep in the swamps and helped runaways reach the coast. Sarah memorized everything. No maps, no papers, only the stars and her will. The night she chose wasn't random. A storm had been brewing for days, thunderclouds rolling in like dark omens. The overseers were tired, the hounds restless. Lightning flashed across the fields and the rain began to pour. Sarah whispered to herself, "Tonight the sky hides me." She wore a faded shawl, carried a small satchel of cornmeal, and one silver cross she'd found years ago, not for faith, but for luck. At midnight, she walked out of her cabin, barefoot, silent. Each step was a gamble. One creak of wood, one shout from a guard, and it would all end. But fate favored her. When she reached the gate, the wind howled loud enough to cover the sound of the lock turning. The sound of that old iron lock echoed louder in her ears than thunder. She pushed the gate, stepped through, and then she turned. For reasons she never understood, she locked it again. From the outside, no one could follow her. No one could open it, and that was how the legend began. The woman who locked the gate and vanished before morning. By dawn, the storm had passed. The sky glowed pale gold and birds sang again. When the overseer came to count the workers, one cabin was empty. They searched the quarters, the fields, the riverbanks. Nothing. Only the locked gate, and Sarah's footprints fading into the mud, until they stopped halfway down the road. That's when the whispers began. Maybe she didn't run. Maybe the spirits took her. Maybe she became one of them, the ghosts who walk the marsh at night. But old Hiram, staring west into the trees, smiled faintly. No, she ran. She's free now. He never told anyone, but he'd found the floorboard open, and the key was gone. The plantation owners sent search parties for days, but the truth lay miles away, in the swamps of Georgia, where Sarah's story was only beginning, because freedom wasn't the end of her journey. It was the start of her legend. The rain had stopped by dawn, but the land still breathed mist. Sarah ran until her legs trembled, until the plantation lights were nothing but faint stars swallowed by fog. She reached the edge of the Okefenokee swamp, where the land turned to water and the world itself seemed to disappear. The trees stood tall and ancient, draped in gray moss like ghosts keeping watch. Every step she took sank into mud. Every sound echoed, frogs, insects, and the steady beat of her own heart. "If I can reach Josiah, I can make it to the river," she whispered to herself. But the swamp wasn't welcoming. It was alive, and it listened. Back at the plantation, the search had begun. 3 men, the overseer, a tracker, and a slave catcher named Boone, were on horseback by sunrise. Boone was known across Georgia for one thing. No runaway lasted more than 3 days against him. He kneeled beside the gate, studying the mud. "She's clever," he muttered. Locked it behind her. "Thinks she can vanish into the swamp," the overseer spat. "Then let the swamp take her. Ain't no one comes back from there." Boone smiled thinly. "Oh, some do, but not the same." Sarah moved silently through the swamp, following directions burned into her memory. 3 cypress trees standing close, then the broken log that points west. That's what she'd been told. By noon, her legs were covered in cuts, and her clothes clung to her skin. She rested beneath the trees, pulling out a small piece of cornbread. A sound, a faint whistle, echoed through the air. It wasn't a bird. She froze. From behind a curtain of moss, a voice said softly, "You took your time." It was Josiah, an older man with weathered skin, eyes sharp like he'd seen everything the world had to offer. He carried no gun, no torch, only a wooden staff and a quiet strength. "You, Sarah?" "Yes." "Then you best keep moving. They'll be coming." Josiah led her deeper into the swamp, through paths no map could trace. He spoke in low tones, half to her, half to the spirits. "This land remembers, girl. Every step taken here leaves a mark, on the living and the dead." They crossed shallow water, fireflies floating around like scattered souls. Sarah saw shapes in the mist. Faces maybe, or tricks of her tired eyes. "You ever hear the story?" Josiah asked. "What story?" "The one about the woman who locked the gate." Sarah stopped walking. "What did you say?" Josiah smiled faintly. "Ain't the first time one of y'all tried to run. There was another long ago, same place, same gate. Some say she never made it. Some say she still walks these swamps, lighting the way for others." Sarah shivered. "Maybe she's walking with me now." Josiah looked at her, then nodded. "Then you'll make it." By nightfall, Boone had reached the swamp's edge. He tied up his horse, knelt in the mud, and let his hound sniff a torn piece of cloth taken from Sarah's cabin. The dogs howled. "You smell that?" Boone said. "That's fear, sweet and close." The overseer hesitated. "You sure you want to go in there?" Boone grinned. "Fear don't stop me. Money don't wait." They entered the swamp with torches high. But the swamp had a way of swallowing light and sound. By the time they reached the first cypress trees, the world behind them was gone. Sarah and Josiah reached a narrow stream that shimmered under the moonlight. Josiah stopped, tapping his staff on the water. "This is the line," he said. "Cross it and you're out of Georgia land." Sarah stared at the water, dark, slow, endless. "What's on the other side?" "Freedom. Maybe. But it don't come easy." As she stepped into the cold stream, lightning flashed far behind, a torchlight, faint but growing. Boone had found the trail. "They're close," Sarah whispered. "Then let's make the swamp fight for us," Josiah said, picking up mud and smearing it on her arms. No scent, no track. They waded through the water, the sound of the hounds echoing faintly behind. Every step forward was a heartbeat between life and death. The air grew thick and strange. Fireflies formed patterns around them, almost guiding, almost speaking. Sarah felt her fear fade, replaced by something ancient and powerful. She whispered to the darkness, "If you can hear me, help me." The wind stirred and a branch cracked behind them, not near but close enough to make her turn. Boone's dogs howled again, louder, but then, silence. One by one, the torches behind the trees flickered out. The swamp had swallowed them whole. Josiah looked back once and muttered, "Guess the spirits took their side tonight." They stopped at a dry patch of land deep within the swamp. Josiah lit a small fire, just enough for warmth. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow we find the river." Sarah lay down, exhausted. The mist curled around her like a blanket. As she closed her eyes, she saw the gate, swinging slowly in the rain. A woman stood beside it, her face hidden, her hands clasped around a key. The woman whispered, "Don't look back." Sarah woke suddenly, gasping. The fire still burned. Josiah was awake, watching the darkness. "Bad dream?" he asked. "Maybe a warning." "Then listen to it." "Morning's close." When dawn came, the mist lifted just enough to reveal the river, wide and silver under the morning sun. Josiah pointed ahead. "Follow the water. There's a boatman who'll take you across. After that, you're on your own." Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes filled with the reflection of light, a freedom she could almost touch. But far behind them, Boone wasn't dead, and the swamp hadn't finished its story. The first light of dawn shimmered across the water like broken glass. Sarah and Josiah stood at the edge of the swamp, where the black water met the river's slow current. The air smelled of mud, salt, and something ancient. "There," Josiah pointed. "You see that boat?" At first, Sarah saw nothing. Then a shadow moved near the reeds, a flat canoe gliding silently through the mist. A man stood in it, tall, wrapped in a hooded cloak. Josiah raised his hand. The boatman nodded once and began to row toward them. "That's your way across," Josiah said softly. "Once you're over, you'll be on the coastal path. Savannah's traders don't look twice at a woman if she keeps her head down. You could vanish there." Sarah swallowed. "What about you?" "Swamp's my home." Josiah smiled faintly. "Besides, somebody's got to keep the road open for the next one who runs." She nodded, and for the first time tears filled her eyes. But before she could speak, a faint sound rose from the distance, the echo of a dog's bark. Josiah's eyes hardened. They're not done yet. Boone had survived the swamp's tricks, but barely. His clothes were torn, one sleeve burned from a fallen torch. The overseer who'd come with him was gone, lost to quicksand or worse. Now only Boone and his 2 bloodhounds moved through the murky forest. "She's close," he growled. "I can smell the fire." He didn't see the faint shapes in the trees, flickering white figures that seemed to move with the mist. He didn't feel the ground soften under his boots. He didn't hear the whisper that passed between the trees. "Turn back." He just kept walking, until the forest itself began to resist. Branches brushed his face like hands. Roots seemed to twist around his boots. But Boone was too far gone to notice. He spat into the mud. "Ain't no ghost gonna stop me." At the riverbank, Sarah stepped into the shallow water, her heart pounding. Josiah gripped her shoulder. "You lock that gate for good," he said. "Don't let their fear follow you." She didn't understand what he meant. "What gate?" "The one you left behind," he said. "Every soul that runs has to close their gate, or it'll drag them back." Before she could answer, the boat bumped gently against the bank. The hooded man looked up. His face was dark and calm, eyes like still water. "Get in," he said simply. Sarah hesitated. Behind her, thunder rumbled again, and a hound barked, closer this time. She climbed into the boat. Josiah pushed it away with his staff, stepping back into the fog. "You'll see me again," he said softly, "when you reach the other side." The boat glided forward, cutting through the mist like a shadow between worlds. Sarah kept her eyes on the far shore, but every time she looked, the land seemed farther away. "It's like the river don't end," she whispered. The boatman didn't reply. He rowed in silence, each stroke echoing through the fog. Then Sarah saw it, faintly behind them, through the mist. Torchlight. "Boone. Faster," she whispered. "Please!" The boatman didn't move faster, but the river did. The current picked up, spinning leaves and branches around them. The mist thickened until Boone's torches looked like dying stars. Then, just as she thought they'd lost him, a gunshot cracked. The sound tore through the fog, and a bullet ripped into the side of the canoe. Sarah screamed, gripping the edge. The boat rocked violently, and then the river itself seemed to fight back. The water churned, rising in dark waves. Boone fired again, but this time the bullet hit nothing. A wall of mist rolled over him, and the light of his torch flickered out. Boone stumbled on the muddy bank, trying to reload his weapon. The hounds whined. Something in the water was moving. Something big. The swamp's silence broke into whispers, dozens of them, coming from every direction. He turned, raising his torch, but the flame went out, smothered by a sudden gust. Then he saw her, a woman standing knee-deep in the water, face hidden in shadow. Her dress floated around her like mist. She held something in her hand, a key. Boone froze. You ain't real." The woman tilted her head, and the chains around her wrist shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Then she whispered, "I locked the gate." Before Boone could move, the water rose around him, pulling him down, swallowing the torch, the gun, and his screams. When the river calmed, only ripples remained. Sarah opened her eyes. The river was calm again, and the far shore was close enough to touch. The boatman leaned his oar against the side. "You made it," he said. Sarah stepped out onto solid ground, her feet sinking into soft earth. She turned to thank him, but the boat was gone. No splash, no ripple, nothing, only mist. She stood alone on the shore, the morning sun breaking through the fog like a promise. The sound of birds returned, and for the first time, Sarah smiled. "Freedom," she whispered. "I made it." Weeks passed. Sarah found refuge in Savannah, working quietly at a small bakery owned by a free black woman. No one asked questions. They just saw a quiet woman with haunted eyes who worked hard and never spoke of her past. Sometimes, late at night, she'd walk down to the river and look across the water. The fog always lingered there, soft, glowing, alive. She'd whisper into it, "Thank you, Josiah." And sometimes, just sometimes, she'd hear the faint sound of a boat oar dipping into the water. Months later, travelers started talking of a swamp that took a man named Boone, of a locked gate at a plantation that no one could open again, of a woman seen walking the Georgia riverbanks on foggy nights, her chains broken, her eyes calm, her shadow never quite touching the ground. They called her the Gate Woman. Some said she still guided runaways through the swamps. Some said she became one with the mist. And some, the old ones, said the spirit of Sarah walks every path that leads to freedom. Years later, the plantation fell to ruin. The gate still stood, locked, the key gone. And when the wind blew just right through the trees, it carried a whisper, "Don't look back." The gate creaked, and for a moment it almost looked like it moved, as if someone, somewhere, was still walking through. Years passed. The old Georgia plantation decayed slowly, like a wound left to rot. The fields, once loud with the sound of chains and whips, were silent now, overgrown with vines and tall grass. The big house leaned sideways, its white paint peeled away by storms. But one thing remained untouched. The gate iron bars, twisted by age, locked tight with a rusted chain that no key could open. People said if you touched it, you could feel a heartbeat. No one dared to enter. Decades later, after the war ended and slavery was no more, a new owner arrived, a man named Mr. Calloway from Charleston. He bought the land cheap, hoping to grow cotton again. On his first day, the locals warned him, "Sir, don't open the gate." He laughed it off. "You superstitious folks," he said. "It's just old metal." But that night, when he went down to inspect it, his lamp flickered out, and in the fog, he swore he saw footprints leading through the grass, stopping right in front of the locked gate. Bare footprints, small, like a woman's. The next morning he left and never came back. Far away, in the towns where the freed slaves had built new lives, stories about Sarah of Georgia began to spread. Children whispered them at night. "She's the one who locked the gate and walked into the mist." Old men told her story by firelight, about how she disappeared, how her courage made others run too. In Savannah, preachers spoke her name softly, almost like a prayer. And on the nights when the river fog rolled in thick and white, the people along the coast would sing a song they said Sarah had taught to the wind itself. "Lock the gate, don't turn your face, walk on through the fog's embrace. Chains may bind, but souls still run. Morning comes when night is done." There were whispers that Josiah still guarded the swamps. Some claimed they'd seen an old man with a staff and one blind eye standing in the reeds at dawn. He'd guide lost travelers back to the road, but he'd never cross the river again. A fisherman once said he saw Josiah talking to the mist, whispering, "She made it, didn't she?" And the mist replied softly, "Yes." In 1892, long after, the plantation was abandoned. A young black girl named Lila came wandering near the ruins with her grandmother. The old woman told her, "Child, this is where freedom first walked." Lila saw the gate, half buried in vines but still standing. It looked heavy, impossible to move. "Why don't they open it?" she asked. Her grandmother smiled. "Because it's already open, just not for the eyes." Then she handed Lila a small rusted key, worn smooth from years of being held. "Keep this," she said. "It's been passed down. They say it belonged to a woman who found her way out." Lila clutched the key tightly, staring at the gate as the wind blew. For a moment she thought she saw a figure in the fog. A woman, walking away, slow and calm, her head high. In 1911, a historian collecting oral stories found mention of Sarah, the woman who disappeared before morning. He traveled to Savannah, to the bakery, where an elderly woman named Miss Ruth claimed to have known her. "Sarah came here quiet as a shadow," Miss Ruth said. "Never told no one where she'd been, but she had this way about her, like she'd seen both heaven and hell, and came back with peace in her eyes." She handed the historian a small, worn book. Inside were notes in faded ink, part prayer, part journal. The last page read, "I locked their gate, but mine stays open. The road goes on, through mist, through river, through faith. If another woman runs, may she find the path still warm beneath her feet." The historian never published the story. He said it felt too sacred, too alive. Generations passed. The plantation finally fell to the earth, vines swallowing the walls, trees cracking through the floors. But the gate remained, still locked, still humming faintly, like it remembered something. In the 1960s, during the civil rights marches, local activists began leaving flowers there. They called it the Gate of the Gone Woman. They said it symbolized every voice that refused to be chained, every person who vanished so others could be free. Sometimes, late at night, people camping nearby would hear footsteps on the road, soft, steady, moving toward the river. If they called out, there'd be no answer, only mist. One night, a young poet from Atlanta visited the site. He brought a camera and a notebook, planning to write a poem about lost souls of the South. As he stood near the gate, fog crept around his feet. The wind shifted, and for a heartbeat he smelled fire and river water. He turned, and there, through the mist, he thought he saw a figure, a woman in a long dress, face calm, walking toward the trees. No chains, no fear, just peace. When he blinked, she was gone. He looked down, and in the dirt beside his shoes was a single key, half buried, shining faintly in the moonlight. He picked it up, and when he looked at the gate again, he could have sworn it had moved, just an inch, just enough to let the wind pass through. The camera fades in, morning light, soft gold, spreading over the marshlands. The sound of birds and gentle water. The gate stands alone, surrounded by wildflowers. The chains are gone, and in the distance a woman walks through the mist, her shadow stretching long and strong. A whisper follows her. She locked their gate and opened ours. The screen fades to black. Text appears, in memory of the countless who vanished into the mist and lit the path for those who followed. 24 Georgia. The sun was setting low over the old fields. A young filmmaker named Maya Thompson, working on a documentary about forgotten women of slavery, arrived at a patch of land overgrown with wild ivy and reeds. Locals had told her it was cursed. They said, "There's a gate out there that was locked by a ghost." Maya smiled, half intrigued, half skeptical. Her camera crew unpacked their drones and lights, ready to capture ruins swallowed by time. But when she saw it, the gate still standing in the swamp mist, her heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just old iron. It felt alive. The air shimmered around it like heat, even though the evening was cool. Somewhere, deep inside her, something stirred. Something she couldn't explain. Inside a nearby shed, half collapsed from age, Maya found a rusted tin box buried beneath rotted planks. When she opened it, there was a journal. Pages brittle, ink faded. The first page read, "I am Ruth, and I write so her name won't fade." Sarah locked the gate that night, and the world changed. Maya's hands trembled. She recognized the handwriting. She'd seen it once before, in an archive in Savannah. It was the same journal entry historians had claimed was lost. At the bottom of the final page, one last line was scrawled, "If you come to the gate, bring nothing but silence. The mist will know you." That night Maya returned alone. The others stayed back, spooked by the stories the locals told around the fire. "When the mist comes, don't talk," an old woman had warned. "Just listen." The air remembers. At midnight, the fog rolled in, thick and white, swallowing the fields whole. Maya raised her camera, but it flickered and died. Then she heard it. Soft footsteps, bare feet against damp grass, and then a voice, low, calm, and full of power. "You came to see the gate, child?" Maya froze. Her light flashed once, and in that flicker she saw a woman standing on the other side of the bars. Her skin was bronze like candlelight. Her eyes were deep and steady. Her dress fluttered, though the air was still. Maya whispered, "Are you Sarah?" The woman smiled faintly. "Names fade, but what we do, it echoes." She touched the gate, and the iron glowed faintly, as though lit from within. The mist swirled around them like smoke. "You all kept walking," Sarah said. "That's all I ever wanted." Then slowly, the fog thickened again, until the woman vanished. When it cleared, the gate stood open, unlocked. The next morning, Maya's team found her sitting by the open gate, staring at the sunrise. She was crying, but smiling too. Her camera still didn't work, but the microphone had recorded something. Just a whisper. She locked their gate and opened ours. The documentary became a phenomenon, titled Mistwalker, The Story of Sarah of Georgia. It went viral, not because of special effects, but because of the energy in Maya's narration, like she was talking about someone she'd truly met. Audiences around the world felt something they couldn't name, a sense of peace, grief, and power all at once. Comments flooded in. "I felt her. It's like she's still walking. That gate, it's in all of us." A few months later, an old historian named Dr. Lewis Grant visited the site. He'd spent decades trying to separate myth from truth. When he examined the soil around the gate, he found traces of iron dust and candle wax, remnants of old rituals. But deeper beneath that, buried in a layer of mud, his team uncovered a wooden cross, carved with a single word, "Free." That night, the professor couldn't sleep. He dreamed of a river glowing under moonlight, and a woman walking on its surface, her chains breaking apart into fireflies. He woke up trembling, and for the first time in his career, he wrote in his notes, "Perhaps some stories are not meant to be proven, only passed on." Years later, the land was turned into a memorial, the Sarah Freedom Site. People came from all over the world, activists, poets, historians, mothers, and daughters, to see the gate that refused to rust. Each year on the anniversary of Sarah's disappearance, they lit candles and sang the same song that had survived generations. "Lock the gate, don't turn your face, walk on through the fog's embrace. Chains may bind, but souls still run. Morning comes when night is done," they said. If you stood there quietly long enough, you could still hear footsteps in the mist, slow and steady, walking onward. Years later, Maya returned again, older now, her hair streaked with gray. The memorial had changed, clean, modern, with plaques and benches, but the air still smelled the same, rain, moss, and river water. She stood by the gate as evening fell. The mist began to rise. She took out the old rusted key she'd found in the dirt years ago. It was cold in her hand, but suddenly it warmed, pulsing faintly, and then she heard it, that same whisper. "You kept walking." Tears filled her eyes. She smiled and whispered back, "And we'll keep walking, Sarah." She placed the key at the base of the gate. The wind carried it away into the fog. The camera pans over the river at dawn. The world glows soft gold, mist curling over the water. In the distance, just for a heartbeat, a figure walks along the horizon, her white dress shimmering through the light. As she fades into the morning fog, the music swells. Violins, faint drums, heartbeat rhythm. Words appear on screen. Some gates are never meant to open because freedom is already inside. Inspired by true whispers from Georgia's forgotten past.